coming, the sun's zooming in, meltdown expected, the wheat is good there, engines stop running, but I have no fear, 'cause London is drowning. I live by the river.
Hello everybody and welcome to the By the Minute Arsenal podcast, our 20th, believe it or not, of this season and indeed ever. I am Matt H and with me today we have Matt V. Hi Matt.
Morning, afternoon, morning, yeah. We've made the big time with 20. Didn't think we'd get this far.
Well, I'm pretty impressed, but we'll see how much further we can go. It's only the two of us today. Pete is not available on this occasion, so we will join him again, I'm sure, at some point in the future. So a good week for Arsenal, probably. We're doing this just a few days after the trip to Swansea, which was a fairly comfortable 4-0 win. Slightly dodgy for the first half an hour or so, perhaps, but once Arsenal got in front, it was really only going to go one way. So, pleasing. A clean sheet and a reasonably comfortable win.
Yeah, definitely. It was crucial we got the win, and we did. I think we mentioned on our last podcast it would be nice to make a quick start and turn up in the first half. And, I mean, it wasn't our best start to the first half, but it was probably a slight improvement on previous weeks. In the sense that we did actually turn up for some of the first half. And once we got that goal, it was extremely comfortable. And I was really impressed with how we started the second half in particular.
Yeah, there was a long period of dominance, one of a better word, which ended with the first of the two own goals.
Yeah.
Some sympathy for Alex Iwobi, who gets... I mean, the second one, I don't think was going very near the goal anyway. But that first one may well have, gone into the far corner. And I have a tiny bit of sympathy with the Swansea defender for that one. Norton, no, it wasn't Norton. Norton was second, wasn't it? I can't remember the first one was, but because that was a freakish angle that came off and went in.
Yeah, I'm never sure about how they decide own goals. I think the rule is generally that if it's on target, it's their goal, but then when it's such a big deflection like that, I think that does throw some dubious nature onto it.
Yeah, my understanding was exactly that it's to do with the whether it's on target or not anyway. But yeah, that was just the way that looped over was ridiculous. But let's go back a little bit though, first of all, and yet again praise Giroud, because him and Sanchez were starting again, which was sort of the interesting point in the lineup, and there he is, the first one to break the deadlock.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of stuff on Twitter. Obviously, there's different opinions on whether we should be starting with him or Sanchez up front, but I guess while he keeps scoring, he's probably justifying it. It was a typical Giroud goal, really. Sort of missed the open goal the first time round, managed to half injure himself in the process, and was there on hand the second time to sweep it home, I guess.
You've made him sound slightly like Michael Crawford in Some Others Do Have Them or something. That's one for the kids. I mean, we'll get back to the game in a second. Do we know anything more about his injury? I haven't heard anything about it being any kind of long-term thing. And of course, he did carry on for a bit afterwards anyway. I
think I read that he's going to have a test, but they're pretty hopeful he should be back for this weekend still.
Okay, that's good. It was Cork that first ball, the second goal, the first Iwobi shot, if you like, hit, and then looped in. And of course, Iwobi was involved in the second own goal, which was off the former Spurs player Norton, which is always nice to see. But slightly wider than that, Iwobi's got a lot of kudos for the way he played. I mean, people seem to have been very impressed with his performance.
I thought he was really, really good. I think he's probably... I know Sanchez has now come onto the wing, but he's probably one of our assured starters, which is a pretty big rise from where he was a year ago. Obviously, Campbell's gone out on loan. Oxlade-Chamberlain doesn't seem to be particularly favoured, so Wenger clearly has a lot of trust in Iwobi, and I think he's definitely repaying that at the moment.
We've talked about this before, haven't we, about how, I think right back at the start of the season possibly, about how individuals, they seem to be, they get a chance, and if they take it, then the manager does seem to stick with them for a long time before he then sort of thinks, I'll try something else. But when Iwobi's playing as well as he is, then absolutely stick with him and see what happens.
Yeah, I remember he had a pretty big start last season. I remember he obviously scored his first goal against Everton away, and I think we started him at the Nou Camp last year, and he played particularly well. So he's certainly justified his start in the team, and I'd probably had a bit of a dip in form around November time, but I think that's to be expected. But he's definitely picked it up again now.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult. We don't always think of it like this, but to think of players playing absolutely superbly for 38 league games a season. I mean, there's one or two that can do it, but it's I think we should allow them all a little bit of a dip now and again.
Yeah, I mean, especially when he's so young. I'm not sure how old he is, but he's obviously got a long career ahead of him, and if he continues his progress that he's making at the moment, then very exciting prospect.
Very exciting, and it's like we can keep hold of him. That would be that'd be the nice thing to make sure we can do. I mean, I was covering it for By the Minute this one, so I made sort of some notes afterwards when I was thinking back over the game, and when we covered some of this anyway. But the first 30 minutes, Arsenal I did think they looked a little bit average, a tiny bit sluggish, but obviously it wasn't quite conceding goals in the first half an hour or so as has happened in the previous couple of games. I thought Swansea defence looked good, and it was difficult for me to realise how they managed to concede 45 league goals.
Yeah.
But of course, after we got the first one, that started to become more obvious, and the job that Paul Clement has to do is obviously a pretty big one, certainly defensively. And they didn't look. It isn't really a Swansea podcast, of course, but they didn't look too threatening up front. I think I'd be quite worried if I was them. And of course, they ended the day, or the end of that match at least, and indeed, I think they still are rock bottom of the table as well.
Yeah, their defence, as you said, was solid enough to start with, but especially in that second half, once we scored our second and third, they were a bit of a mess, really. Didn't offer a lot at the back. I don't think you can blame Fabianski not getting a lot of support.
No, absolutely. So we've talked about the Giroud getting the key goal, which was great. And speaking of key, that was a terrible link that I didn't actually plan. The dive or not for the potential Swansea penalty, which I think came just after the Giroud goal. In the first, was it the first? I can't remember, first or second half now. I mean, it was a dive and he was booked supposedly, but I had my heart in my mouth just for a second because Koscielny did seem to leave his foot in a tiny bit longer than was necessary.
Yeah, at first look, it did look like it could have been a penalty, and then when I saw the referee go to get a card out of his pocket, I did fear the worst. But thankfully, he pointed the other way, and replay suggested, although Koscielny left his leg out, I think he pulled it away just in time, and Key still went over a leg that wasn't there, really.
Yeah, I suppose my concern was I could have seen it given.
Yeah.
I think that was my worry. And I wouldn't have been happy about that, of course. But it was just a slight worry. I don't want to criticise Koscielny because he's done so many things, but he does seem occasionally to get into those situations. But maybe that's just the function of being a defender. I mean, maybe that's just unavoidable. It sometimes seems that it is him on a few occasions, but maybe that could just be my brain playing memory tricks on me.
Yeah, I guess because he's always so committed and always puts his body there that there are going to be times, I guess, when it doesn't come off. And just as well, it wasn't a penalty with our recent record. We seem to concede a lot of penalties.
Yes, and don't necessarily do a particularly good job of keeping them out, as we know. We've mentioned that before. So overall, I think we're pretty happy with the performance. Slightly sluggish start, but pretty good, and then pretty good in front of goal when we got those opportunities in the second half, even if we were helped by some poor defending and goals. There's the one big point to discuss though, potentially, and again, it may be a big point, it may be a tiny point, but after 79 minutes with the game safely in the bag, Arsene Wenger, having already taken Giroud off, of course, after his sort of limping around the place for Oxlade-Chamberlain, made what to me and to many people, I imagine, seems some fairly innocuous substitutions, taking off Mesut Ozil and Alexis for Lucas and Welbeck, and of course the story became, with the game safely put to bed, Sanchez's reaction, which, in case anyone hasn't seen it, he looked miserable as he was coming off. He kicked his gloves off, chunted away to himself, sat on the edge of the bench, and pulled a coat over his head and looked like the stroppiest of all teenagers, basically. So Now, we've been told subsequent to all that, Arsene Wenger said, don't worry about it, he's very committed, this kind of thing, doesn't matter. But I don't know, maybe I'm pessimistic on this, but I was looking for stuff that perhaps wasn't there, but I didn't think it was particularly promising or particularly positive. What did you think?
No, I mean, I get he wants to play all the time and wants to stay on the pitch because he probably thought there were more chances to score, but I think there has to be some common sense on his part. The game's in the bag, obviously bigger games to come, and so take him off, don't risk anything. And I mean, we've seen some reactions from him. I think this was taking it a step further, probably a bit ridiculous. I mean, I hope it's what Wenger said, and that it's just his attitude towards always wanting to play. But yeah, we've mentioned in the past couple of weeks he hasn't looked particularly happy, and I guess there's a pretty easy way to look at this, and that it doesn't look great, because it wasn't just the way he looked miserable coming off to then sort of throw the coat over his head. Yeah, it's not particularly promising considering the contract situation.
Yeah, I think if it was on an ordinary day, or not an ordinary day, so a year ago or something, you perhaps wouldn't think anything of it very much. But everything, we wouldn't be sort of human and interested in the club if we weren't thinking of the context and the background to that kind of thing. So, yeah, I mean, we'll have to. There's not much more we can say about it now. I think we can be mildly concerned, particularly as we're coming into a period now where the club is talking quite a lot. I mean, I'll talk about this later, but we'll mention it now about the contracts that are being signed. So Giroud, Koscielny and Coquelin all signed a contract extension of one degree or another last week. Mertesacker, I read today, is signing another year. So obviously it's that period where they're hoping to get these things wrapped up. Good news about the three French players. Certainly, I was mildly surprised with the Giroud one. I wondered if that might be a sort of year-on-year thing, whereas I think it's a little bit longer than that.
Yeah, and fair play to Giroud. He obviously hasn't been first choice for much of the season, but his attitude's been great, taking his chances when they came, and clearly wants to stay and keep fighting to sign the team. That's a loyalty which is very impressive and haven't seen from other French players around the league.
Yes, it's very noticeable, isn't it, when you compare with Payet and others. There's the difference between players wanting to stay or absolutely not caring one job. I mean, I'm old enough, they're human. I can understand that if they see the opportunity for some more money somewhere, fine, go and get it. But then don't say the things you say just a few months before. You say, yes, I'm delighted here, I'm not going anywhere. I don't mean say, well, I might be gone in a few months, but you could find a middle ground, I'm sure, where people could be kept happy. But yeah, I was quite pleased to see those three signing. Mm-hmm. Hopefully, over the next few weeks, we'll get a few more things nailed down. I know it, as we've said before, it doesn't mean they won't be going anywhere, but it gives us a little bit more stability to the club, and hopefully now the club is able to compete financially with the other teams around it, which it couldn't do perhaps for a few years. So. There's more chance of holding on to these chaps. Although, of course, it'd be nice if they could get some trophies. That's always a thing that's going to help. Yeah.
There are obviously a few players that look like they could be signing contracts. So as you mentioned, Mertesacker, Cazorla's contract runs out. I don't think it's this year. I think it's next year. And so, obviously, while the attention is on Ozil and Sanchez, there are still those crucial first-team players that are probably just as important to tie down as well.
Yep, it's an interesting period, and hopefully, so far it started well. Let's put it that way. It's quite promising so far. I've got some other thoughts on contract and players and stuff. We'll come back to that afterwards. First of all, we're going to preview the Burnley game this Sunday, 2:15, home game for Arsenal, the fifth of these six, as we sort of put them, games we had to win to stay in the race. 4 out of 5 so far isn't bad, and the no, hang on, get my maths wrong. 3 out of 4, and then with one draw isn't too bad so far. So Burnley. Now I was having a little look at their information about them, I should say. So they beat Southampton this weekend, and they are in the top 10 of the Premier League, which, without meaning to sound patronising, is a pretty impressive season for them so far.
It is. I'm pretty sure they've got nearly all of those points at home. I'm pretty sure their away form is quite dreadful, but they do seem to be a very different team depending on where they're playing. I think They ran City close though a couple of weeks ago. They're going to be another one of those teams that sit deep and are hard to break down, and we need to start quickly and hopefully get an early goal. And with Joey Barton's free kick prowess, a whole nother element to prepare for.
Yes, I was going to mention, funny enough, I had Barton as my one of my other points to make. I mean, well, he's an odd chap, isn't he? And let's be honest, you just don't really know what to make of him in terms of his football career. He's obviously had very promising periods when he was younger, but I don't think he'll mind if I say he's never quite reached the heights that perhaps all these young players, you think, how far can they go? He's been a bit of a nomad, and that's been his own fault, for want of a better word, in terms of his behaviour. His relationship with Rangers this season was particularly odd. Sort of turns up, plays a few games, and then even a place as dysfunctional as Rangers sometimes seems to be, he doesn't, he causes trouble there. So, it's he's always one who could cause problems, you feel, on his day. But yeah, I don't really know if we have to worry about him particularly, or if we should just be thinking of another fairly comfortable home win. That would be the nice way to approach it.
Yeah, we should be. I mean, there's just as much chance of him either getting sent off or attacking one of our players, or indeed headbutting one of his own.
That's true. There is. I've forgotten about that. There's always that opportunity with him, isn't there? Which is nice. I'm just trying to see if I can find a breakdown of home versus away form for Burnley, and I should have done this earlier, and I can't find anything now. Now I can only find stuff. Oh, hello. Bear with me, everyone. I'm going to do home matches, and no, that's not going to work. It's going to be a pain. Talk amongst yourselves. Right? Yeah, Burnley would be third if it was just based on home matches, which is quite impressive. We would be fifth, as a matter of interest. Nice. If you do it on away matches, they rather drop down the league, and they would indeed be bottom. In fact, they haven't won a game away from home.
Right.
And they've only drawn 1, and they've lost 8. So that tells you what you need to know. We should be looking at a fairly comfortable win on that basis. They've only scored 3 goals away from home, whereas we have scored 27 at home. So and we're third in the league if you look at it on home form. So that's hopefully a fairly comfortable win. At least it has to be if we're going to stay in and around the top 4, or even, dare I say it, higher than that. Okay, well, we're also, I was going to say, because for reasons it will come on to later, I was going to preview the FA Cup game, but we can't really do that yet because we don't know who it's going to be. No. We know it's going to be Southampton or Norwich, who we're doing this on Wednesday. They play this evening. I believe Southampton are at home. Now, Southampton have obviously been a bit of a bogey team for us, but they're not having the best of seasons at the moment.
No.
So I wonder if we would be too worried about having to play them if that was what happened.
No, I mean, they don't look at all as good as they were last season. Their captain wants to leave. Van Dijk has also been rumoured to be being targeted by some other teams around the league. So once again, on paper, it's a game that we can still go into with confidence, but it's just our previous records at home and away, really, to Southampton, but particularly away, that causes concern every time we play them.
Yeah, Southampton have actually lost 4 in a row, which I hadn't realised, and are down in 13th. So we would be away, wouldn't we, in this cup game? So it could be. I mean, we won't go over the whole thing now, but if we want to have a good run in the cup, because I think we do. And it would be nice to. Norwich are, if Southampton aren't having a great time, Norwich are having even worse time, aren't they? Relatively speaking, they were expected to challenge in the Championship, but as I recall, are making a bit of a mess of that. They're 11th in the Championship. They've only won 1 of their last 5. They're not having a great time themselves either. So, whichever way it ends up, what we're saying is we should have a chance to win it, but it will depend a little bit on who we play. In terms of our players as well, so we can't really give much of a better preview, but it's because we can't control that. But I think whoever it is, we should fancy our chances against them, should the opportunity arise.
Yeah, obviously prefer that it is Norwich, but whoever it is, we do have a strong enough squad so that whatever team we do put out should be able to get the win.
That's right. Okay, well let's hope that's the case. Sorry, that sounded very patronising. That's right, because I was looking at something else at the time. Well, let's move on then. So just to finish off with a couple of other bits and pieces, back to this idea of the various contract situations. We signed, I can't remember exactly when it was, last week, a sort of an interesting signing, sort of out of nowhere, Cohen Bramall, who we signed from Hendersford Town. He's a 20-year-old, obviously left back, I believe. Now, I'm not suggesting we're going to know anything about him in any great detail, but just interesting thing that used to happen, of course, a lot more. But this idea of picking up a player from, well, not just lower league, from non-league, and then straight into he was playing for the Arsenal under-23s this week. Any thoughts on that? Is this a thing we can see happening regularly?
I don't really understand it. He was being scouted by League One and League Two teams, and then we came storming in and signed him. 20 isn't. I mean, obviously it is young, but if you to pick someone up from non-league as a sort of somebody you hope you can mould into your team, 20 seems a bit older than I would have expected. But I mean, I can't say I know anything about him, and I don't know if we'll ever see him in the first team. But I mean, it's pretty cool for him, and I hope he does well. Obviously.
Absolutely. It'd be great. I mean, if we actually see him anywhere near the first team, I'll be surprised. But I think you make a good point. A 20-year-old turning up does seem a little bit unusual. They must have seen something. They must think there's something there that they can mould into a thing. Or maybe it's just the case you take a punt on it. You know, I don't know what his wages are, but I'm sure they're very affordable for Arsenal.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting. Keep an eye on that. It may be he's one of these players we never hear of again. But it'd be interesting if anything does happen. If he's not going to turn up in any cup games now. You're talking about a League Cup game. So you're not talking about till August or whenever that would be, September anyway.
Yeah.
But you never know. Stuff might happen between now and the end of the season. But I just thought it was an interesting idea. I wonder if we're going to be seeing more of this. Although perhaps this is just one of those weird things where the opportunities arise. But we'll leave it there and we'll see what happens with that.
It wasn't a great start to his career. He had to delete his Twitter account because a few years ago he professed to be a Man United fan. So that got found out early doors by some fans scrolling through.
Oh, I didn't realise. Well, there we go. It's a bad start, isn't it? But it could be worse. It could have been Spurs or Chelsea or something.
Yeah, I didn't really.
So one other person I wanted to very briefly mention, Carl Jenkinson, just in terms of looking at people going the other way. Now, I was always a fan of Jenkinson for his heart and his effort as much as actual ability, perhaps. I'm being a little bit unfair there. It looks like he's on the way out. It looks like he's done something very bad in the previous lives. He's going to join Palace, who are, of course, struggling at the wrong end of the table and have Allardyce as the manager. I don't know. I'll miss him, I think, or I'll miss knowing he's there, although I appreciate he perhaps didn't give a massive amount over the last couple of years, of course, to the club because he wasn't around. Any thoughts on him?
It was nice that he supported the club. It was nice to have a fan playing for us. He spent a lot of his time on loan and didn't get huge chances at Arsenal. Bellerin's obviously been first choice, and when Chambers was here, Chambers was ahead of Jenkinson at right back. I think it probably makes sense for Jenkinson to look elsewhere because the chances aren't going to come here, you'd imagine. But, I mean, for the rest of the season, if anything happens to Bellerin, obviously Jenkinson's going. I don't know what's happening with Debussy, but I wouldn't suggest we could rely on him being here. So that leaves either Gabriel or Maitland-Niles as our second choice right back.
Yeah, it is a slightly that is the concern about this move, isn't it? That you have someone who is not playing where they should be or doesn't have much experience, and against certain teams that could be a real problem. Yeah,
it would have been nice, I think, to probably keep him until the summer. Interesting that we've decided to let him go, but I don't know whose choice that was. But yeah, wish him well, and it's a shame he's ended up with Sam Allardyce, really, to corrupt him after all these years.
Well, if someone could give Sam Allardyce a pint of wine, and they might not have to worry about him for very long. But there we go. Okay, then. Well, so that's this week covered. Now, we are going to be very continental and have a very short winter break. Very short. So we'll be back on we think the 30th of January. So we're only going to, so we'll catch up then with the Burnley game and with the FA Cup game, whoever we're against. And we'll preview, it should be that week, Watford, and then of course Chelsea. So that'll be a big one for us. So we thought we'd have a little break to recharge the batteries just for a few days before then. So for the moment, we'll be back on the 30th. But so thank you very much, Matt.
Thank you. I'm going to be off to buy Costa a ticket to China, help teach them Mandarin if needed, do anything I can.
That would be lovely, wouldn't it, if he was gone by the time we're back and by the time that game it takes place. That would be lovely. That's a lovely thought to end the pod. And thank you very much to everyone for listening, and we'll be back on the 30th, so we'll speak to you then. Cheers, bye-bye.